What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Overstimulation Station. My name's Josh Cannon, and I just saw Leaving Neverland. Let's talk about that.
Hi!
So, Leaving Neverland was a 2019 documentary, and it premiered at the Sundance Film Festival back in January, and it just recently premiered on HBO in March. Is a two-part documentary. The first part's 2 hours. I'm assuming the second part's something like 2 hours. I saw part one. I wanted to give some thoughts on it, give some reactions to it, because I do have strong feelings about the whole thing in general, although my final conclusion as to did Michael Jackson molest children or didn't he, the jury's still out for me, because I don't really trust everything I'm told, and I wasn't personally there. But I'd still like to break down both cases, and examine he did do it and he didn't do it, and I don't know, maybe you can draw your own conclusion. So this documentary focuses on two boys. One went by the name Wade Robson, and the second kid went by the name James Safechuck. Now I'm going to mainly focus on James Safechuck because that was by far the more juicier interview in the documentary. Now, James Safechuck was a self-described by his mom a real cute kid growing up, and everyone's like, oh, you got to get this kid in commercials and blah blah blah. They took him to the talent agency. They threw him in the Pepsi commercial that Michael Jackson was in. It was the one where you got all of Michael Jackson's memorabilia in this room, and this little boy's looking all around like, oh boy, look at all this Michael Jackson stuff. And then Michael Jackson peeks his head in and goes, looking for me? And the kid's all like, oh my God, it's Michael Jackson! So that's how the two meet initially, is on the set of this Pepsi commercial. So skipping through a lot of stuff, they become chums, they become pals. Now, this is where it gets a little weird for me personally. So then Michael Jackson starts like hanging out at this boy's house. No crap. This Michael Jackson, the most famous pop celebrity of all time, is hanging out at this like 8 or 9-year-old boy's house, just chilling like they're friends. Fine, nothing inherently illegal or weird about that. Well, a little weird maybe, but nothing illegal about that. They're hanging out. The mom's describing Michael Jackson almost as her second son. Jackson's spending the night over there. She's like washing his clothes. And they're just, like they're both two 8-year-olds hanging out with each other. There are pictures of this that corroborate that. There are pictures of Michael Jackson in a middle-class house, just sitting on the carpet, just the king of pop right there, dude who just did Thriller and Bad, just hanging out. So that lends some credibility to what he was saying, as far as here's some pictures of Jackson hanging out at my house, and here's the things that I have to say about it. At some point, Michael Jackson takes James Safechuck, the little kid, he takes him to Hawaii. And while they're on the airplane, he even lets the kid do like a little mock interview of Michael Jackson on the airplane. And they play that audio. So now we have audio attaching Jackson to this kid. We have pictures attaching Jackson to this kid. And eventually, Michael Jackson asks this kid to come on tour with him. And his parents let him do it. After he finishes school, he goes on tour with Michael Jackson and is constantly, staying in hotels with Michael Jackson. And at some point, if you want to believe it, I mean, Jackson's admitted before in a documentary that Martin Bashir did, it's called Exploring Neverland or something like that, I forget the name of it. Jackson admits that he sleeps in the same bed as kids that aren't his. So they are presumably sleeping in the same bed together. And that's when the kid, who is a man now, almost 40 years old, that's when he starts talking about how it was at that point that Michael Jackson taught me how to masturbate. And you just go, whoa, that took a left-hand turn. Although the whole time as you're watching this documentary, it's leading up to that. Because ever since the early 90s, we've been hearing about Michael Jackson and child molestation allegations, and Jackson going to trial multiple times for it. So in the back of your mind, you know that's going to come up. And, whew, buddy, then it's just a series of very specific things that Michael Jackson liked sexually, and these two, the boy and Jackson, basically like fall in love, and they're in like a romantic relationship, and they're seen in public holding hands, and there's this little gesture they would do according to Safechuck where they'd like do like this on the inside of each other's hands when they were in public, and that meant I'm thinking about you, but like in a sexual way, like I'm thinking about the sexual stuff we do, and it's, you know, whatever. And you know, I mean, it even goes as far as Michael Jackson buying a wedding ring for this boy. And he actually brings out the wedding ring in the documentary. He pulls out the jewelry that Michael Jackson allegedly purchased for him. It could be a huge, elaborate hoax. Stranger things have happened. Then the kid describes in detail about when Michael Jackson got Neverland Ranch and all the rooms that they would have sex in and fool around in, and all the while this boy's parents, or this boy's mom rather, was so, I guess, just enthralled by the Jacksonism and the celebrity and the stardom that was surrounding her, that she was very much willing to turn a blind eye to their alone time that they would spend together. You know, she was very naive in the sense of, oh, I'm sure everything's fine. Okay? So that was the first boy. Then you get into the second boy in the documentary, who is also now a man, who goes by the name of Wade Robson. Now, this kid was an Australian, he was a little boy, Australian kid. He was the whole Michael Jackson impersonator. He was the cute little kid who wore the outfit, who did the little, you know, moves, and that was his whole claim to fame in Australia. He was like the biggest Michael Jackson impersonator, and, you know, so young and all that, so wow, so impressive. So through a series of like winning contests and this, that, and the other, this kid gets put in contact with Michael Jackson. Jackson flies his whole family out from Australia to Neverland Ranch, which is something he did a lot with kids. I mean, he always was bringing kids over to Neverland Ranch. And so he does the same thing for Wade and his family, and they end up going there, and even the grandma is flown out there, and they're all in awe of Neverland. And this was like during the recording of Michael Jackson's Dangerous album, so I believe this was after the James Safechuck incident. So this was the new kid, if you will. And, you know, they spent the night together, and, you know, they had a great time, and the mom and rest of the family would go off and tour Los Angeles, and Wade, he just wanted to stay with Michael Jackson, because, like, that was his hero, which is understandable, you know, that you would want to stay with your hero instead of go seeing L.A., So he's just staying with Michael Jackson, and it was either on like the second or third night. Jackson wasted no time with this kid, if you believe these allegations. On the second or third night, Jackson's already rubbing this kid's, you know, downstairs regions. I'm trying not to get too graphic because I don't want this video to get taken down. So he starts allegedly molesting this kid, Wade, and, you know, Wade, unlike James Safechuck, who actually went on tour with Jackson, and it seemed like they had more of a, like, relationship, seemed like Wade was just, like, a sex toy to Jackson. It seemed like that was the main thing that this boy was used for, was that. Which is disturbing to think about and to talk about. But, anyway, they spent a lot of time together, and Jackson even came up with a name for Wade, which was Little One. Now, they didn't show as many pictures of those two together as they had with James Safechuck. But they did have a video where Jackson was wishing Wade a happy birthday, and Jackson even says Little One in the video referring to Wade. So that little pet name, at least, was true. Eventually, when it came time for the Australian family to leave and take Wade with them, Jackson was like, not having that. He's like, no, this kid's got to stay here. Please let me keep him for a year. And the mother's like, no way, that's my son. That's not going to happen. And they got into this hour-long discussion, this hour-long back and forth about, you know, I can really help this kid's dancing career because Wade wanted to be a dancer. And the mother knew that. And Jackson's saying, I could help Wade out so much with his career if he stayed here and blah, blah, blah. And the mother's like, no, that's like a whole year. And I don't really know you that well, even though you're Michael Jackson. So she takes Wade back to Australia. Well, the whole like stardom and in glitz and glamour, of America, being back in Australia, I guess wasn't, really cutting it for her, because after a while she started thinking about it. In the meantime, Michael's writing letters and sending faxes and all this to this Wade kid. And I think just the minutia of day-to-day life in Australia just made the mom go, okay, you know what, Wade, we are going to go to Los Angeles, and we are going to pursue this dancing thing, and you are going to be with Jackson, but I'll be there too, and we'll all be there together. And so they fly back to Los Angeles thinking that they're going to have all the accoutrements that they had earlier. Well, they apparently waited too long, because as soon as they got there, normally, the red carpet would be rolled out for this kid. They're having to rent their own motel, get a rental car to go to the music video shoot of Black or White. And on top of that, Wade thought he was going to be the dancer in the Black or White video. But then cut to the new kid, Macaulay Culkin. He was the one who ended up being in the Black or White video instead of the Wade kid. And part one basically ends off on both James Safechuck and Wade talking about how Michael Jackson would bring new kids into the fold. And that he was, Wade, the Australian boy, was just yesterday's news at that point. Michael Jackson wasn't as interested anymore. Now, this is all what the documentary is saying. This is not what I'm saying. So for the argument of Michael Jackson did, in fact, molest kids, you have all that detail. You have the photographs of Michael at the kid's house. You have the video. You got the audio recordings. The kid was on tour. Michael Jackson admits that he sleeps in beds with kids. He's had multiple child abuse allegations over the years. All that. That's one side to it. Then you have the men's stories. They're now men. They were boys, but they're now men. You have their stories, right? Stories don't mean that much to me, personally. You can have a really compelling, crazy story, and people can rush to judgment and be like, oh my God, burn Michael Jackson's corpse alive and tear down all his monuments, and which they already did that in England. In Manchester, they took down a statue of Michael Jackson already. And a lot of radio stations have said they're going to boycott Michael Jackson's music, which I think is crazy, because it's like, you're just now doing that? I mean, if you were going to do that, wouldn't you have done that back in the early 90s when the first allegation came out? But I'll get into that in a second. So, you have all this stuff, and I don't really, the whole story thing, look at the Jussie Smollett incident, okay? Stories don't mean shit to me. Facts do. So, the facts here are that you do have the pictures that link Jackson to hanging out with a kid. You do have all this other kind of stuff, like the videos and the, whatever. Now let's look at the other side. Let's look at the Michael Jackson did not do it side of things. In this documentary, you can clearly see that the two mothers were momagers. They were stage moms deluxe. 1,000% stage moms. These were people who they themselves perhaps wanted some kind of fame or attention or notoriety themselves, and they did not get it in their life. And they are living vicariously through their children in some form or another. You can see it by their actions, especially the Australian mother willing to leave her family, leave her husband who had just been diagnosed with bipolar disorder, leaving them in Australia just so they can go and kiss Michael Jackson's ass and just suck a little bit more juice out of that rock star, famous person juice box. So, when they saw that the ride was over, as it were, I mean, wouldn't it make sense for them to come up with anything possible to keep themselves relevant? You know, I mean, let's just say for the sake of argument there was some kind of coaching going on, you know, between the mother and the kid. Like, you know, Michael Jackson held my hand one time. Well, did he do anything else to you? And, you know, who knows? You know, all I can say is the moms were definite stage moms who definitely they themselves wanted some limelight and some attention. Then you got the age-old gold digger theory. You know, obviously Michael Jackson has a lot of money, had a lot of money. You know, one could argue that after the first sexual molestation allegation was settled at a court for a large sum of money, any parent whose kid is hanging out with Michael Jackson has got to get the thought at some point that if I drum up some molestation shit, and there are pieces of shit that are willing to do this, don't think there aren't, they're thinking to themselves, if I get little Billy over here to say that Michael touched his pee-pee, we could be millionaires. We could never have to work again. And he's going to Neverland now. In fact, he's going tomorrow, because Michael loves, you know, kids and helping them and sending them on roller coasters at his Neverland ranch. So, hey, little Billy, get in here. Look, Daddy's about to tell you to say some weird stuff, but you're going to have to, you know, hear me out on this one. How do we know that that's not a possibility? So, the gold digging thing. Then we have the letter from Michael Jackson's estate that came out following this movie. So Michael Jackson's estate put out this letter that read, Leaving Neverland isn't a documentary. It is the kind of tabloid character assassination Michael Jackson endured in life and now in death. The film takes uncorroborated allegations that supposedly happened 20 years ago and treats them as fact. These claims were the basis of lawsuits filed by these two admitted liars, which were ultimately dismissed by a judge. The two accusers testified under oath that these events never occurred. They have provided no independent evidence and absolutely no proof in their support of their accusations, which means the entire film hinges solely on the word of two perjurers. And now I'll skip down to this other part here, where it says that conveniently left out of Leaving Neverland was the fact that Robson, that was the Australian boy, was denied a role in a Michael Jackson-themed Cirque du Soleil production. His assault allegations suddenly emerged. And then we have, because despite all the disingenuous denials made that this is not about money, it has always been about money, millions of dollars, dating back to 2013 when both Wade Robson and James Safechuck, who share the same law firm, launched their unsuccessful claims against Michael Jackson's estate. So now that Michael Jackson is no longer here to defend himself, Robson, Safechuck, and their lawyers continue their efforts to achieve notoriety and a payday by smearing him with the same allegations the jury found him innocent of when he was alive. So that letter, the whole Wade Robson getting denied the dancing role in the Cirque du Soleil production, them sharing the same law firm, it's pretty sketchy. It's pretty, I wouldn't say damning, but it's up there with damning. Again, still could have happened, and Wade Robson could have still went and tried to get into the Cirque du Soleil production despite the fact that, you know, he was molested and all that. Maybe he's trying to make lemonade out of lemons. I would like to see that whole point where the letter mentions the claims were the basis of lawsuits filed by these two admitted liars, which are ultimately dismissed by a judge. The two accusers testified under oath that these events never occurred. Can we get some footage of that? Can we get some documents corroborating that? Because the Michael Jackson estate is literally saying these two accusers said that these events never occurred. And now they're on this documentary saying it did occur. So, which is it? So, that's Exhibit C, if you will. And, you know, I can't help but to point out that this documentary has come out at a very weird / convenient time. the last we've really heard of Michael Jackson was after during his death back in 2009, and then you had This Is It, the movie that Michael Jackson did, and then after that, in the last few years, all's been quiet on the Michael Jackson front. But then there was a big movement that started with Harvey Weinstein, and then a bunch of other men getting, accused of all these sexual misconduct. Corey Feldman, I felt like, almost started it with his saying that there are pedophiles in Hollywood, and then it turned into a women's movement. It was called the Me Too movement. And I think it's great that all these fucking pieces of shit dirtbags who, were raping women and molesting them and all that, I'm fucking really glad they got their comeuppance. And I'm not at all, bashing that movement or anything, but it is convenient that you don't hear anything about Michael Jackson in the last, 6, 7, 8 years. Then this Me Too movement happens last year, a year before. I think it was last year, 2018. Now, all of a sudden, you have a documentary solely about molestation and sexual abuse. It's just kind of... It's almost... Don't act like people... Don't sit there and act like people haven't made money off of exploiting that whole Me Too movement. Don't act like people aren't capitalizing on that and exploiting it like they do everything else in this world. People exploit tragedy. It happens all the fucking time. I was trying to not curse in this video, but I guess that my true self just can't be held in. Yeah, dude, people are making money off of this. Make no mistake of that. So, if you're going to put out a documentary about these very specific incidences where these kids are alleging that Michael Jackson, molested them, what better time than now? Honestly, what better... Strike while the iron's hot. And the iron is hot for this kind of stuff. And it's sad that it has to be that way. But if you remember, this is how the news cycle works. Because there was a time when every other day it was police brutality versus a black man of some, in some very situation. And that was on all the time. Every week. Do we ever really hear about that anymore on the news? Not really. Not as high profile as Trayvon or Freddie Jackson or, the riots that happened. You're not really hearing about it now. Do you think it just stopped happening? No, it didn't stop happening. There's still police brutality. There's still racial profiling. It's just not a hot topic in the news cycle right now. And you're not even hearing that much about celebrities being exposed for molesting or raping women anymore, like you were a year ago. Why? Because the news cycle has shifted to something else. Are women not getting molested or raped anymore? Sure they are, sadly. But the news is just choosing to not cover that. So, having said all that, this movie was... Even though it debuted in 2019, it was filmed in the heat of all this Me Too stuff. So, again, not saying that's the case, but I'm saying that can be also thrown in the pot for the Michael Jackson has been set up camp. So, like I said, there's two different sides to this story. And that's why this debate rages on for as long as it has, because Michael Jackson is undeniably a very bizarre guy who lived a very bizarre life that none of us can even begin to understand unless you're like some child star who also was a successful adult. If you're not in that world, then you really don't know what it's like. I don't know what it's like, so I don't know. He's an interesting guy. I like a lot of his music. I'm totally willing to cop to the fact that he's a child molester if he is, but again, I don't know. I think if Macaulay Culkin came out and said that it happened, then it would be the thing that would push me over the edge, because Macaulay Culkin has a lot of money. He doesn't need money. He would have nothing to gain from doing that except to expose the truth of what really happened. But, you know, Jackson's celebrity friends, Corey Feldman, Macaulay Culkin, many various other people have said he never did it. So, I don't know, guys. I don't know. But that's my thoughts on this documentary. It was super fascinating nonetheless, very graphic, hard to watch at some points, or hard to listen to, rather. You should check it out if you can. I hope you enjoyed watching, or found this entertaining at least. Until next time, have a good rest of your night.